Morning, everyone. Okay, so thank you all for joining this morning for the WatchGuard endpoint security overview. So thank you for taking the time out this morning. I'm joined by Carla and Amy from Purdicom, who are sitting in the background. If you have any questions during the session, please feel free to put them into the chat. We'll get round to them at the end. And yeah, hopefully you'll get something out of today's session. So first off, myself, my name's Tony Roberts. I'm one of the technical pre-sales engineers at WatchGuard. Just so you know, I come from the Panda security side of the business. WatchGuard acquired Panda, which has been in the cyber industry for over 30 years. They made the acquisition of our company last year, and we've now been fully integrated into WatchGuard Cloud. And that's the side of the business that I come from out there. Been doing it for, well, Panda for over 14 years, so been around for a long time, seen lots of changes, lots of exciting improvements, and yeah, it's been an interesting time out there. Now, before we get into the EPP side of stuff, just a quick one on WatchGuard's product stack. Now, we have 4 pillars that we focus on when it comes down to security in the cyberspace. We have network security, so we're talking about our UTMs, both physical and virtual. So these are our fireboxes with a different suite of security services that we can have over the top of them. We have our MFA product, we label it Endpoint, so pure multi-factor authentication, which is a real key must these days when it comes down to security. We have a whole Wi-Fi stack of products as well, with our secure Wi-Fi and our new Wi-Fi 6 as well, and obviously the endpoint side of the business. Now, we've got these 4 pillars. Each section just breaks into a whole rake of different other technologies and functions and features within there. But the wonderful thing about it all is it's all managed and configured all from one place, something called WatchGuard Cloud. So this is our unified security platform. So it makes things a lot more easier to provision, assign, monitor, and configure all from one location. We'll see a bit of that a little bit later on. Obviously, it's worth noting that we've got our award-winning WatchGuard One partnership. Now, we're not box shifters. We work really closely with our partners to get, enable them to sell, to support, and really get to grips with the product stack. So we've got lots of technical certifications. We've got marketing material, we've got everything that people need to enable them to really kind of get on board, understand and believe and sell ultimately the products that we've got out there. So today's agenda, we're going to be focusing on endpoint, obviously. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the threat landscape, because this is ever evolving. We're going to take a look at the difference between EPB and EDR and what that actually means. We'll cover on some feature modules that we'll cover off briefly, and just mention some highlighted incentives that we obviously do out there as well. Now, threat landscape. Now, this is obviously an interesting topic and is changing all the time out there. So if we think about, cyber breaches are happening all the time. In just the last few months, back in July, a few months ago, Garmin fell afoul of a ransomware attack with resources being inaccessible, resulting in applications not being able to access data. Now, the users affected were broad, and even included pilots who relied on that solution to map their flights out there. So it was quite impacting. They were asked to hand over $10 million to gain access back to their data. So it's just a clear example. Another one was the Carnival Cruise Lines got hit. Cruise giant, who owns 10 cruise lines and is currently the world's largest travel leisure business, faced a breach and loss of an undefined volume of data. It's just another example. The one that we've probably all heard, in recent weeks, months, is the Colonial Pipeline breach. Now, this was a result of a compromised password and a legacy VPN. Now, this opened the door to an attack that crippled the oil delivery to a large portion of the United States. These are all big numbers, and no matter where we look or go, just look on the BBC site. It's really simple to sort of search and query this. There's lots of other resources, but there's cyber attack, breach, crypto, things happening all the time out there. Now, one of the things that we kind of get fed back and when I speak to prospects is, it will never happen to me. I've never had a problem. It will never be a situation. It only happens to big blue chip companies, people with millions of dollars, millions of pounds at their disposal, and very weak estates. That's actually not true. We hear about in the media the big companies because you kind of expect better of them. It just means that they're a bigger target, and ultimately those ransoms are a lot higher. But it happens to small businesses all the time, but we just don't hear about it so much. So it will never happen to me. Now, there's a great website called secplicity.org. Now, this is actually a WatchGuard website. I'm just going to drop over to this quickly and show you this. Now, this website, this is fed by telemetry from our fireboxes, so our UTM appliances. So it's a great website to kind of use as a reflective point when you're speaking to clients out there, to kind of give them a feel for what the situation is if you're not just looking at the media. These are real numbers. So looking in this dashboard view, in the last month, and this is internationally, there are 5.3 million malware detections by our gateway firewall appliances. Now, I'm just going to change this specifically to the United Kingdom. Going to here. The number's going to drop down a bit. Let that filter. Okay, so just shy of 250,000 malware detections at the gateway. Now, the thing that I want to show you, if I scroll down a little bit, is this piece. 0 day compared to known malware. And this is where the issue starts becoming quite noticeable. 92% of the detections that we're making are 0 days, previously unidentified malware, compared to the 8% of known malware. These 0 days, they're typically delivered through HTTPS. And it's a key thing to kind of be conscious of, that you need to make sure that you'll be able to scan and analyze that data to protect the endpoints in the business. And these are real figures. These numbers go up and down within here. I'll be honest with you, in the last year, I think I've only seen it once drop below 90%. So with the UK, obviously we're a target. We're being focused on quite significantly, and these 0 days is an issue. Now, what I'll do, let me go back to my slides. Now, as we talk about threat landscape, I think it's well worth highlighting that actually today, this afternoon at 3 p.m, our CSO is holding a webinar about the top security threats worldwide for Q2 21. I'll include the link at the end of the session today, but I recommend that you go register for it. Even if you can't attend, you'll get the follow-up media associated to it. But they'll be talking about, the top malwares being detected and blocked, the MEP techniques and methods being used out there. And they just make a really interesting kind of education piece to kind of see what we're seeing and what we're finding when we start looking at the real nuts and bolts of things going on. So we want to talk about what is EPP and EDR. So first off, EPP, or Endpoint Protection Platform. Now, this is device, your endpoint's resident protection. It typically comes with a suite of technologies to help protect the endpoint. Now, though this approach to malware detection has evolved over many years, it simply doesn't stack up to the threats that businesses face day to day. This is mainly due to it, at its core, it's using technologies that rely upon signature heuristic matching to detect what is known about that is identified malware. So when we think about endpoint protection, it's the way it's been for many years. It's using libraries, signature definitions to detect what we know about. And as we saw in that Secplicity site, there's a gap. 92% unknown compared to 8% known. This is what we need to address. EPP is not really up for muster. It needs to be bettered. Now, this is when we start thinking about EDR, or endpoint detection and response, or NGAV. Yet another acronym. This industry is full of acronyms, and they change and evolve over time. Now, EDR has previously been a very separate market to AV historically, but in recent years, it's been necessary for the two markets to merge. Now, EDR, Gartner defines EDR as solutions that record endpoint system level behavior and events. For example, users logging in, running processes, what network connections are being established, what changes are being made to the system. So EDR is kind of those eyes on the system, watching out for what's going on. Now, where things really kind of differ and mix up is you can have a monitoring platform that uses EDR technology, but it's what you do with that information and how easily you react to that information when it comes down to potential cyber threats out there. This is where things really differ. So in essence, EDR leverages forensic data off endpoints in order to identify or mitigate attacks in potential real time, depending on the technology you're using, but I'm going to show you how we do it. So we want to talk about the prevailing paradigm, EPP. But firstly, EPP still has its place. That traditional method still has its place, but it has its limitations. Like I mentioned, EPP is typically only able to detect malware that is already known about using the techniques I previously mentioned. It identifies something it can match against as malware. Great. It may have capabilities in identifying suspicious entities, but it leaves everything else alone to run freely. And that is where the risk comes from. So with the unknown or unidentified comes the risk. If it's brand new malware, it will fall into this category, and traditional EPP solutions in essence don't react, resulting in a breach. With the suspicious items comes the need for more effort and resource by you to analyze and determine whether there is a potential risk to the business. So EPP, it's good, but it's missing a massive chunk out there. So with our model, we overlay EPP with our EDR approach. This enables us to close the gap. We achieve this by introducing, and I'm going to actually show you some of this actually working so you can put this into context visually, but we achieve this by introducing a zero trust model with full autonomous classification in the background. By monitoring and identifying and classifying all running process in all endpoints, we're able to remove that risk, providing a superior protection layer along with minimum effort. So the EDR technology that we employ, we've got the telemetry monitoring, we've got the system being watched and monitored and reported back into the console. But it's not just all about monitoring, it's reacting. And that's the key part, how you react, when you react, and how that impacts the business out there. And we want to keep that as really clean and simple for you and your clients out there. So just to be clear, if you ever look at the WatchGuard product stack, we have 3 flavors of our endpoint solution. We have EPP. So if you've just got, just want endpoint security, you can just go for that. EPP using those traditional methods. Hopefully you don't do that, but you can just go for that option. We do just EDR. So that EDR technology piece, which you can use and coexist with third-party AV products. So if you've got a current solution already deployed, and maybe you're in term with that and you can't remove it, you don't want to have loss of cost with that, you can overlay it and introduce EDR to work alongside that solution. And then we've got WatchGuard EPDR, includes both technologies and brings them into one, all from a single management console, universal agent, everything is included and bundled within there. But I do want to show you these things working and kind of give you a tangible feel for how things hang together within here. So what I'll do is let me drop into my console quickly. Let me go back to here, not that one, into here. So going back to what I mentioned earlier, WatchGuard Cloud, our unified security platform. So with a WatchGuard Cloud account, you can log into it. Now, before we get into the endpoint, I just want to clarify that WatchGuard Cloud is a true multi-tenant, multi-user platform. You're a partner, you've got clients. You have all your clients listed within your console. It's easy just to set them up. You just click on the add symbol, add in those client details, and then depending on what product from the stack that they might be interested in, you assign that to that account. And with that, it means that you've got a top-level view of provisioning, accessing, monitoring, and controlling that product for that particular client. So it just brings it all together from all of our stack within the console. I won't go into WatchGuard Cloud in too much detail, but we know I could do a whole session just around this piece alone. But all of our partners, WatchGuard Cloud is the way forward. Now, if I go into an end user console, so I'm just going to go straight into my subscriber view. We typically refer to WatchGuard Cloud at a partner level as service providers. I'm going to go into the subscriber view, which is our end user console, and you can give your clients their own access to their own individual tenancy within here as well, if need be. And what I can see within here is it just defaults to the dashboard, and I can see that I've got alerts. I've got my dark web scan, which is our own sourced information from the dark web, so you can scan against your client's email addresses within there, see if they've had a breach in the past. If I've got any appliances, MFA, I've have control and access to those units within here as well. But we're talking about endpoint security. So I can see the status and detections going on within here. If I just go to endpoint security, that's going to take me into my endpoint console. So this is my EPDR dashboard. So I don't want to go through all the bells and whistles within the console because there's a lot in here. But one thing that you'll note is that it's really clean and simple to get along with. It's very cleanly laid out, tabs along the top, giving you access to different parts of the console. Whenever you access the system, it always defaults to status security. And what I can see in here is my estate dashboard. So just to clarify a point, this is a web-based management portal, okay? So you've got no cost of ownership. You haven't got to install servers to host administration consoles or anything like that. It's purely you log into a web browser and you manage the estate from that location. Protection is still installed on the local endpoints. It is resident protection. So no matter where that machine goes, it may be in the office, it might be on the other side of the globe, it doesn't matter, that protection is installed locally. Now, we use the internet as our network. So regardless of where your machines are, you may have 1,000 machines in one office, you may have 1,000 machines scattered to the four corners of the earth, we don't care. Those machines are all talking to the web, where our console's hosted. So it means that you've always got visibility of what is going on out there within your networks. So what we see here is my dashboard. How many machines have I got integrated into the console? Are they communicating? How long have they been offline for? Are they up to date? Now, the up to date bit is quite an interesting point because we've always got a roadmap. Okay, there's a lot that's planned for the near and distant future within our product roadmap within here. Now, when we release a new version, that's just part of your subscription. There's no cost associated to that. If we've bettered the product, we want to pass that on to our users and our clients. But we can control and manage that all through the console. So if an upgrade occurs, we upgrade the back end, you log into the console. Oh, look, I've gone from version 4 to version 5. Your endpoints are talking back to the cloud. Oh, look, you've got a new version for me. Well, I'll download and upgrade and apply that as and when I can. You can control all of that, but it means that you've got the capability of ensuring you've always got the latest version of the product out there. And it's one of the reasons why we went down the cloud route back in the day. And we've been doing this for a very long time because this industry evolves very quickly. We need to ensure that we are able to get the best detections, the best techniques of identifying risk on the endpoints out to our client base as quickly as possible. When you've got something on premise, it doesn't really kind of work. First of all, if machines pick up and leave the building, you lose visibility of that. Now, when a new version comes out, you need to download and upgrade the endpoint if it's accessible, or wait for it to come into the office next. It's all time and effort. Being a cloud-based system, it just makes things so much more easier. Now, underneath there, we've got our detections. So this section here, this is all related to the EDR technology. And this is the piece I want to kind of elaborate on and focus on, but we'll come back to that in a moment. So we've got our EDR dashboard, and then we've got our traditional based threats at the bottom. Now, as you can see, it's a very cleanly laid out console. I've got numbers and detections going on within the console. Key part is you don't need to be reacting to this, okay? It's purely just telling you, we've found this, we've detected this, and we're handling it for you. So it's pretty hands off. You can set up email notifications, so it'll alert you when things are being detected. Obviously, you want to always keep a vigil out for activity going on out there. But what it's not doing, it's not going to be generating more work for you. Oh, I've detected something. You need to go off and analyze and pick that apart. We don't do that. We do this all for you as part of the service. Now, all this data in here, it's all clickable. You can click on any of this information. I'll go down to my traditional based threats. I can go into here, drill down. I can find out what's been detected and where and what was handled by it. So you've always got detail that you can elaborate on within the console. Let me just go back up to the security dashboard. I'll come back to this EDR piece in a moment. Now then, we've got web access as well, web filtering. So the web access control is just what it is. It's web filtering being applied on the endpoint. Both HTTP and HTTPS inspection, we use the same categories that we employ within our firebox. It means that at the very least, you can see the sorts of sites people are going to, or better still, you can start applying restrictions and blocks to those sites as well by category or by URL allow or deny lists within the console. Now, you can see under that web access, I've got indicators of attack. I'm going to come back to this because this is a really interesting point. Now, further down, you can see I've got patch and full encryption. These are our feature modules. I'm not going to talk about them today because, believe me, I could just spend hours talking about those in their own right and it wouldn't be fair to you. But these are some of the add-ons that we can include within the product. And this, I suppose one thing to highlight is when we release new modules, if they are something that you require, you just add them to your account. And a lot of this is completely transparent. You don't need to be rebooting machines. It just becomes visible in the console and you start taking advantage of it. So we make it really transparent and easy to adopt new technologies, new features, if there's something that there's a requirement by the client out there. Now, if I go over to computers quickly, the biggest hurdle for anybody adopting a new technology is distribution, deployment. How easy can you get it out into your estate? So we try and make it as easy as possible. First off, you can just go into the console, click on Add Computers, decide on the operating system you want to install to. The Windows one's an MSI file. Incidentally, this is a universal agent, and this is how we license the product. It's per device. If I give you 10 licenses of EPDR, you can install it onto 10 Windows devices, Mac, Linux, or Android. They can be desktop or server operating systems. We actually don't care. A license is a license. Where you use it is entirely up to you. For the Windows one, it's an MSI file. Push it out through GPO, PDQ deploy, or any kind of RMM solution you might have. It's just an installer. And another thing that we're capable of doing is when you're deploying out to an estate that's using a third-party AV product, we can also remove those solutions as well. How easy that migration from one to the other. Start the installation, detects product X, runs the uninstaller for product X before putting on the Panda, because you don't want two AVs running on a machine at the same time. We also include the capability of LAN deployment within here, built into the console. So if I just go back to security quickly, we can set up discovery nodes. So any machine that you've got the installation onto can be a discovery node. What it basically will do is it will scan the network based on the schedule that you define and identify anything that's not been protected previously. So you can have this on a scheduled scan, once a day. If it finds anything, it will flag them up in the console and say, I found some machines that are unprotected. And then you can actually deploy through here as well. So if I go over to settings within here quickly, I want to kind of talk about the nuts and bolts of the protection. I want to get to that EDR technology and show you that working. So a couple of key parts. We break it down into policy sections. So per computer settings, this is one policy area. I can have as many policies as I want within here. Policies are applied to groups or individual machines within the console. It's one of the ways that you can organize your estate. Now, if I go to one of these policies quickly, the per computer settings only controls two factors. That is upgrades. So when a new version comes out, do you want machines to upgrade? By default, this is all switched on and enabled for you. But you can say, look, I don't want upgrades to occur, or I only want upgrades to occur between this time frame, and I want machines to automatically reboot. you can control all of that within the console. One of the key things to be aware of is the anti-tamper. Threat actors will always try and eliminate anything that's going to stop them performing whatever actions they want to do on your estate. So this section actually protects the protection, both with the installation. You can't uninstall the product if you don't know what the password is that you've defined within the console, and also the protection services. You can't, even if you're an admin user, you can't do an SC stop protection X of the protection services. They're hardened to maintain themselves and to stop being manipulated out there. This is actually on by default. So if you just log into a console today and do your deployment, actually this is already embedded in place as part of that, but you can change it all at any point. We'll go down to workstations and servers. This is where we define the actual configuration of the console. So I was going to go into here and look at that. Okay. So the actual protection policies, again, broken down, you can have different policies applied for different devices out there. I just kind of want to highlight the key parts within here. So under general, you've got pop-ups. If something is getting detected, do you want to notify the user? You can suppress that, you can customize that if need be. Exclusions. I think this is quite an interesting one to be aware of, because there's always some exception to the rule that you want to add in. The thing to note is exclusions are kind of blanket ignores. If I put in ignore file.exe, it's basically saying, look, ignore it. Don't watch it. Don't do anything with it. Just allow that to run. Now, it does come with some risk. So what we actually introduced is a different way of doing this, and it's through authorized software. Because what we do within here is we don't stop watching. Our EDR technology will continue to watch, see, monitor, log what's happening. We just won't interfere with it. So unlike an exclusion, which is a blanket ignore, authorized software says allow, but continue to watch. So if anything starts behaving out of sorts, we can still see that information being fed into our telemetry within the back end. I'll go back over to my policy within here. Obviously, we've got our traditional EPP technologies within here. So the anti-malware, by default, you leave all this alone. If you start switching things off, you're basically reducing down your detection service. I don't recommend you do that. We have the firewall component, so you can enable system and program-based rules. Let's go back. Device control, so blocking access to external media with the ability to allow explicit unique hardware, like a USB's hardware ID. You can allow one stick, but block everything else out there if need be. And then we've got the web access control, which I touched on, switch it on. I always like to switch this on because it means I've got information being fed into the console. But if I want to start blocking categories, just put the ticks in, click on save, and away we go. Now, I want to talk about the EDR technology. This all comes under the advanced protection. So take your machine, for example. Everything that runs on your machine, those applications, those files, they fall into one of three categories. They're either good, which means to us, it means that we've seen it before somewhere else. It's previously identified, it's safe, it's goodware. It's malware. So we've already identified it as malware, and in those situations, our EPP technology will detect it because we already know what it is. Or it's an unknown. Remember, 92% of detections being unknown. Now that's the sort of thing we're really interested in understanding. So everything you run on the machine falls into the good, the bad, and the unknown. Now, what we want to do is we want to control how we react to these unknowns. So you've got your endpoint there, you've got WatchGuard EPDR installed, and you're using the machine on a day-to-day basis. Now, when we look at the policy settings within here, we have three modes that we can operate in. Firstly, audit mode. Audit mode is just monitoring. There's no proactive blocking going on within here, really. So I don't recommend people use that because you're not really benefiting from the technology going on behind the scenes. The default mode is hardening. And this is a learning mode, because what we're doing is we're allowing things that are already installed in your machines to run, even if they're unknowns. We don't interfere and react to them. We see them, we log them, and we're monitoring them, but we don't block them. But what we do in hardening mode is we will block anything that's been newly introduced to that machine. So things that are from downloads, networks, network shares, attachments, anything external being run on that machine, hardening mode will react to and block if they fall into that unknown classification. And then we've got lock mode. Now, what you typically do is you run in hardening for a couple of weeks after deployment. At that point, we've typically seen everything that you run within your business, all your niche bespoke software that was already installed on the machine. We've seen identified all of that. So there's no more surprises. So moving over to lock means that if anything else new that comes along that is an unknown, that we can react to. Now, to be clear, we approach this with a multi-layered approach to protection. Okay, so we have our signature heuristic-based detection, we have our contextual layer, we have our anti-exploit technology, we have our behavioral analysis, we have our threat hunting within here. We have a multitude of layers that sit around the system, watching and monitoring and reacting in different forms to the threats that we identify out there. I mention that because we want to make sure the anti-exploit is switched on. Again, on by default. When you first provision the console. And everything's changeable, but I just want to highlight some of the stock values within here. Now, when we're looking at application exploitation, if we're looking at zero fileless or malwareless types of infections, okay, living off the land, legitimate apps being used in malicious ways, things that don't even have a payload or are memory resident, and we see and we can monitor and we can react to all of that within here. So just a couple of key switching features within here. Operating mode in lock, anti-exploit in block. You're in that perfect position to protect against those unknowns that might be manifesting from a multitude of different elements within there. But I'd like to show you this actually working and kind of explain the sort of the process flow that we apply here. So what I'm going to do is let me go to my virtual machine. Okay, so on this machine, I have EPDR installed. I can tell by my WatchGuard system tray icon. And what I want to do, so this is a typical user machine. I've got Office 365 installed. You know, they use the browser, they use Word, it's day-to-day operations. Now, I want to show you what happens when an unknown manifests itself on a machine. So I've got a zero-day generator here. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to create this new file. This is going to be an executable in this instance. When I click on start, it's going to create and run this unknown. So think of unknown malware, zero-day activity. So click on start. And this is what happens. Untrusted program blocked. So I want to kind of put this into context. Again, we use a zero trust model. What's happened here is this machine has tried to run something that we as an organization have never seen before anywhere else. Okay, all the telemetry from all of our endpoints are fed into our platform, our collective intelligence. This machine has tried to run something that has never been seen before. So we've reacted to it. And we've reacted in a form of, in this instance, pre-execution blocking. We've not allowed it to take a foothold on the endpoint. We're not doing contextual monitoring in this situation. We're not saying, okay, well, let's just watch this item. Oh, look, it's encrypting data. That's not good. Let's try and terminate it and roll the system back. You know, we don't employ that as a first layer because that's risk. Okay, if it's got that point, it's already started running, then you hope you could be able to react to that and roll the system back. And that's potentially too late in the day. But we don't sandbox on the endpoint because now malware is clever. It tends to know when it's being monitored and watched and picked apart. So that comes with its own risk. Also, that does add a layer of potential resource consumption over the endpoint as well. So we don't do that. We do pre-execution blocking. Zero trust. We don't know what you are, so you're denied and blocked. But this is where all the service now comes into play. From a user's perspective, okay, something got blocked. Okay, we don't know what that was. I'll just get on with my working day. All my other applications that I use day to day still work happily. But what actually happens here is when an endpoint identifies something, it will submit and alert the console to that fact. So if I go back to my EPDR Console, and I'll go to my status security. So I said I'll come back to the EPDR dashboard. Here we are. In this section here, the EDR, currently blocked programs being classified. If I go into here, what I'm seeing is submissions from my endpoint of these unknowns to our platform. Those unknowns are actually being uploaded for analysis, and we do this in the back end. So if I go for one example here, let's go to this machine, this device, this file on this machine tried to run. It was an unknown, so it's been uploaded into our platform, and we're now picking this apart. Now we are going to automatically deliver a verdict. Is it good or is it bad? This is completely autonomous. We don't defer the decision to you or your team to make. You can obviously override the system if need be, but better still, let us deal and handle it for you. So that file has been uploaded. It's now going through the WatchGuard mill, being picked apart, and a result will be delivered. If it turns out to be good, well, you can run it. It's now goodware, and now we know that that item is goodware, and that is shared globally. If it's malware, same thing. That's now detected as malware, and it's going to always be the case. Now you can also interact with the system if need be. So this detection here, let me go back into here. If you decided to make your decision, say, look, this thing that's getting blocked, I think it's okay. I'll click on the unblock button. Don't do that, but you do have the option. You can do your own due diligence. You can use the search on Google or VirusTotal, look on the web, see if anybody else knows what these items are. But I'll be honest with you, I've seen examples where something's been blocked. I've looked in VirusTotal, everyone says it's all green. No one classifies it as malware. Yet we've still finalized a verdict on that item, and it has turned out to be malware. Perfect example of something that was previously unidentified and ended up being malicious, but nobody knew what it is because it's targeted attack for that particular client out there. Even if you do unblock items, okay, you do have the option. It doesn't mean that we ignore it. It just means that you're making that decision to override the blocking mechanism in the console. Those unblocks fall into the programs allowed by the admins, but we still classify it. It's 100% attestation. We see everything and we classify everything, and that is completely autonomous. We will see it. We would not let anything fall in between the gaps. If it's running, we see it, we classify it regardless. So even if you do allow something, we still will monitor that, deliver a verdict on that item. Is it good or bad? Now, what's interesting with that is if you made a decision to allow something to run, maybe you weren't running in the blocking modes I talked about, you were making an exception, or you've done an exclusion in there for whatever reason, and that something turns out to be malicious. If you're unblocking items within the console and you're allowing those things to run, we'll still classify them. When we complete a classification, it turns out to be malicious, it will drop into the malware, pups, or exploit sections of the console, depending on the classification that we finally deliver to it. Now, what I wanted to show you is in the malware section, I've got some examples of things that have been ran. Okay, maybe this is an example of someone unblocking something in the console. Now, when I look at these, I can see, oh look, these items have been ran. Well, I know that I clicked on the filter within there. These ones actually touch data. Okay, so it's actually touching documentation on the endpoint, and these ones made network connections. So I can see some of that light telemetry that we've been monitoring on those endpoints, that EDR technology, that process user, network connectivity. I can see that. But if I go into one of these, okay, so I could go and have a look. Okay, this machine, this process was run. Because I know it's been executed, I can click on the activity tab, and I see the malware life cycle. Basically, what we do is when we identify something as malicious, if it's been executed, we then look at the EDR database and say, well, let's stitch this all together. And in chronological order, we'll show you from start to finish what's happened in those endpoints. So this is quite raw. If I look at the activity graph within here, Let me zoom out a little bit. I'm zoomed far too in, so let me go back. There you go. So viewing activity graph is a visual representation of that same data with a timeline on the bottom. So if you want to see how that day progressed, if I go back to the beginning here, there's my unknown. It was subsequently, allowed to run for whatever reason decision was made, and I can follow it through. So this, let me get rid of that screen there. This one made registry key changes, some network connections, start running processes, and you can just follow it all through from start to finish. So you get a detailed breakdown of what's actually happened in this situation. This is not good. If you're looking at this in a console, it means you let something run and you're having to do some sort of remediation from that process. All you should really see in here is one thing: item detected, blocked, submitted, classified, and everyone gets on with their working day. If you let things run, depending on what it is that's being executed, if you ever look at a crypto run on a file server, that's a spiral graph of activity, very pretty to look at, really bad for the business. And that recovery aspect, is just something you don't really want to fathom. But it gives you that insight. I really like this view because it gives you an understanding and appreciation of what's going on in the back end with the platform, what is being analysed and looked at, and how we can, richly show you the content of what's happening within your estates. So that is kind of the EDR technology, okay? How we identify, we block, we submit, we classify, completely transparently, completely autonomously. Now, there's another piece in here I want to show you. Now, these attacks, these executions, they may have happened as a result of a breach. Before you even get into payloads, someone has been acting within the network nefariously, elevating permissions, doing whatever they need to do to become, establish a foothold within your business. So how did this happen in the first place? There may have just been a case someone's just downloaded it. Okay, that's fine. That's very easy to determine. But it could be something a little bit more complex. And this is where we bring in indicators of attack, okay, IOAs. Now, this is based on the MITRE attack framework, enterprise-grade analysis of techniques or tactics and techniques used by threat actors to gain access, elevate, exploit systems in order to establish themselves and perform whatever actions they want to do out there. Because of what we do in our EDR technology, we see all this telemetry. And if we match any of that activity to an IOA, we red flag it. Now, we don't react to it because this is something outside of endpoint security, but certainly at the moment we don't, but watch this space. But what we do is we'll identify and we'll flag it up to you. So it's an email alert. If we get any IOAs being flagged up, you get a notification and details around that. When you look at it in the console, I can see my different tactics and the different techniques underneath them. If I go into one of these, let's go for an example. Click on this one. I'm looking at an IOA, which is privilege escalation bypassing UAC. Okay, first off, when we look at these, you've got recommended actions. This is a high probability attack. Okay, so if we're flagging this up, you want to go down the route and take those recommended actions to prevent him from pivoting away or laterally moving within the network. We include the telemetry as to what triggered this alert within here as well. So why did this happen? Well, here's the information that we flagged up that you can understand and digest. And then down the bottom here, you've got the MITRE framework breakdown. It just links through to the site, which explains in detail what's going on within here. So this is a really nice piece. When we think about the hows did they get to that point where they were actually attacking the business, these are red flags, and they're good red flags for a reason. So by able to identify these early on, if we think about the cyber kill chain, by being able to intercept and identify things even earlier on, you're in a better, stronger position to keep the business protected. Now, there are some elements within here that we do actually include some auto remediation, specifically RDP. Now, I saw another example of this earlier this week. Someone's got a terminal server, an RDP server, and they're natting it from the public web. Big no-no, people still do it. And they had an alert from the system saying, your system is under an RDP brute force attack. And we can show you that this machine has had tens of thousands of attempted RDP connections established to it. Now, what we can actually do within the console, just to be clear, this is just all part of EPDR. This isn't an add-on, this is just stock product. What we actually do within here is we include the capabilities of, just going to my settings, go to my IOA policies. Again, this is on by default. We report and block the attacking IP address. So we can identify that public facing IP that is attacking our RDP server. We contain that specific IP address. So we will let you continue to work and connect to it locally or by other means, but those attacking IP addresses, we do it by concurrent connections or attempted numbers of connections, and we identify them and we isolate and contain them within there. So it's just another layer which goes beyond kind of the EDR piece, but we use the same technology in helping businesses stay secure out there. So I just wanted to focus on those pieces specifically within there. So I hope you found that useful. But before I wrap up, I wanted to go back and just talk very briefly about the feature modules. So these are those add-ons that, if you've got EPDR, these are things that you can add on to the console. And I wasn't going to go through them in today's session because I can talk. Now, those feature modules come in the form of patch management. You can do Windows and third-party patching all through the console. At the very least, it gives you visibility of what your security status is or what's out of date on your machines, but you can also action it. Okay, you're instructing those endpoints through the EPDR console to upgrade, install these updates that you're identifying out there. A big must. Patch management is a key part to keeping yourself secure and compliant. We do WatchGuard full encryption. Really simply done, we control BitLocker on the endpoint. We can force full disk encryption through the agent and pull the recovery keys back into the console, and you can see all the status through there. We have something called WatchGuard Data Control, which is our kind of GDPR piece. Now, it's not DLP. What it helps you identify is PII in unstructured data. Converted means if you've got users storing documents on their endpoints, we're able to identify those documents and the type of PII they contain, names, addresses, bank details, etc. And we can flag it up in the console. Not only can we identify where that data is residing, but you can also search for it. Great for things like the right to be forgotten, the right to erasure. Someone comes to you saying, I want you to remove all documents that contain my details in them. Okay, so I go to the data control console, enter in their name, click on search, it then revisits the machine and says, okay, I found this information in these documents, in these locations, on these machines. We can do all of that through data control. On top of that, that's kind of referring to data at rest. What about data in motion? I can see users' behavior data, who's opening documents, who's emailing documents, what processes are accessing documents that contain PII. And you can even add in your own UDF as well, user-defined fields of data. So you can actually look for your own particular piece of information. And then we've got the advanced reporting tool. This is basically big data analytics. I showed you the malware lifecycle, which is part of that EDR telemetry. Well, ART, Advanced Reporting Tool, gives you access to all the telemetry. If you want to find out which applications users are running on the machines, it's stored there. It's a mini SIEM. Now, you can use our implementation, or if you've got your own SIEM platform, we can actually just feed our telemetry into that platform. We use the Ceph and Leaf format. So if they can consume that sort of data, we can feed it into third parties as well. It's a key part when it comes down to threat hunting and big data analytics. We can feed that all through there. So we have those 4 feature modules. One thing I'd like to be clear about is obviously we have our three core products, EPP, EDR, and EPDR. We then have our 4 feature modules that are available. The only thing I want to make sure that is clear is the dependencies. Some of this technology relies on the EDR. So if you've got EDR or EPDR, you can access everything out there. If you've just got EPP, because of that EDR technology being missing, you can't get access to the ART and the data control piece. So just to make you aware, but I'll be perfectly honest with you, if anyone's looking at endpoint security, most people go for EPDR. Otherwise, you'd be missing a trick with that full suite of technology in there. Almost the final point. So promotions, incentives. We are always got promos going on to help incentivize current and new partners to get on board with the system. We do something called Passport, the security bundle. As a partner, you can get an NFR for £1 a license for this product, and it includes the endpoint, the MFA, and DNS WatchGuard, which are some of our other elements within there. It just enables you to get access to the product, get familiar with it for a very cheap price. And that actually goes some way towards your certification process as well. So it just helps across the board. Also, we've also got endpoint volume licensing. We've got a deal going on at the moment that if you're buying any seats over a certain amount, you get a heavily discounted price on that as well.
Hi, Tony. Thank you. Thanks so much. We did actually have a few questions. Should I just read those out? So we've got one here. Do you support legacy operation systems like XP?
Actually, yes, we do. XP Service Pack 3, 2003 server, we've still got full support for all those legacy OSs. You'd be surprised at how many people still use it. It tends to be like larger organizations that have got these legacy systems because they had software specifically built for them. But yeah, absolutely, we support legacy OSs and it's not going anywhere. We'll continue to maintain that.
Perfect. Another one here as well. How long do configuration changes made in the console take to be picked up by Endpoint?
Okay, so I think we're talking about when we make configuration change, we're changing the way the modes operate, or we're adding in exclusions within the console. It's actually real time. As soon as you make a change and you click on save for a policy, as long as machines are online and they're communicating, they pick that up instantly. So just because it's the internet, we're using it as a network, doesn't mean there's any lag within there. It's pretty much instant. So it just worked perfectly well.
Okay, and thanks for posting that link as well. And another question for you, Tony. So Danny asks, should all new clients of ours show in the WatchGuard Cloud portal? Obviously, I'm a loyal, long-time customer of Panda RDS, so still seeing clients under the old portals.
Yes, so legacy partners, the old Panda Partner Center is not going anywhere. Okay, they're still going to continue to be maintained, but what we've got is we've got WatchGuard Cloud that has got all of our technology integrated into it. Now, at the moment, we're keeping them separate, but I'm sure in the future there will be an option for people to convert and pour customers in the old Partner Center into WatchGuard Cloud. So you just consolidate them all into one location. It's not something you can do at the moment, but it will be something in the future. So yeah, both systems are maintained side by side. The products are exactly the same. It's just a different skin over the top of them. Functionality wise, everything is like for like within there. It's just the old partner system has been ported into the WatchGuard Cloud. And ultimately, we want to promote WatchGuard Cloud because if we think about, we're just talking about endpoint. When we bring it into WatchGuard Cloud, we've got all the other pillars of technology within there. And one thing that's got me really excited is unification or correlation. Correlation of unified systems. I don't know if that's a word, I might trademark that. Basically, when you've got fireboxes, MFA, Wi-Fi, endpoint, you've got information coming from all of those different services. But why not take advantage of all that telemetry from one top banner? So think about XDR. This is the vision for where we're going, and it's one of the things that we're probably going to see some changes in the very near future. So cross correlation of platforms in one system, and that's where WatchGuard Cloud really comes into its own within there. I think we're talking about here, malware attacking data with PII in them. So first off, I'd hope that didn't happen, because remember the way the EDR technologies works, we're preventing and blocking that activity from happening in the first place. Your data shouldn't be getting touched because we've stopped that process from happening. If you've got malware or applications being used by nefarious actors touching data, you can actually see that in the data control module. We can show you all the activity around PII, who's been accessing what they were doing with that data, and you do get real kind of detailed breakdown of that within the console. So you could see all that activity within there. Maybe it's worth a session for another time to actually go through that in anger, or see it as part of your NFR, get it added on, use it in anger. Best way to learn, test it, play with it, and get familiar with it. When will the endpoint link with the WatchGuard firewall? Yeah, so that's a key part. Q1 2022. Okay, then we release the next major release of the endpoint. In there, we're going to have technology that is integrated into the fireboxes themselves. So that's kind of our next major phase in moving towards the bigger picture. So yeah, it's coming very, very soon. So not long at all.
I feel like I should hang on a little bit longer now. I'm going to get caught out otherwise.
But look, if there's any other questions that come up, please feel free to drop them over in an email. You can contact myself directly. You can contact the team at Purdicom. We're not box shifters. We want people to get the best out of the solutions and appreciate for what they are. So yeah, if there's anything you need, anything at all, just let us know. But I appreciate your time this morning. And yeah, hopefully I'll get to speak to you all again very soon.
Thank you very much, Tony. It was a great presentation.
No problem.
Yeah, and I hope everybody found the content useful. And just to reiterate as well, we will be following up the recording. So I know someone was asking earlier if the session was being recorded. It is. And yeah, so we look forward to continuing the conversation with you. Get in touch with us, as Tony said already. But other than that, have a fantastic rest of your day, everybody. We look forward to seeing you again soon on the next one. So thank you very much.
Great. Take care, everyone. Thank you.